Muslim Brotherhood says the presidency bid by the former regime's spy chief is an attempt to, quote, steal the revolution. Iran says a deal has been reached to hold the first round of talks with the P5+1 group in Istanbul and the second round in Baghdad. And in Bahrain, anti-regime protesters block roads and set tyres on fire, demanding the release of the jailed activists on hunger strike. Hello, it's 5:30 in the afternoon here in Tehran. You're with Press TV's World News. The top story: in Egypt, a bid for power by the former spy chief has raised fears among people that the remnants of the toppled autocratic regime are trying to regain power. The Muslim Brotherhood's candidate for presidency has warned that Omar Suleiman's nomination is an attempt to steal the revolution. Khairat al-Shater described Suleiman's bid for power as an insult to the popular revolution. The millionaire businessman says Suleiman will only win through forgery, and if it happens, a second revolution will take place. Suleiman, who also served as vice president under ousted ruler Hosni Mubarak, insists that his candidacy would restore stability in the country. He also accused the Brotherhood of practicing monopolistic policies. Suleiman has long been viewed as the mastermind behind ousted dictator Hosni Mubarak's autocratic rule.
Surrounded by a cordon of military police and some supporters, former Egyptian spy chief and one-time Mubarak vice president Omar Suleiman formally filed his application to the Supreme Presidential Electoral Commission. After declaring earlier that he would not run, Suleiman issued a statement on Friday saying that he changed his mind, as this statement was published shortly after the Muslim Brotherhood, Egypt's most powerful political group, unveiled a candidate to run in the polls.
ترشيح عمر سليمان ده بداية الانقلاب على الثورة.
The SCAF is afraid from the increasing popularity of the Muslim Brotherhood, and that's why I think they failed Omar Suleiman in the last minute, but I don't think their plans will work this time.
على حالة اقتصادية زفت على انفلات أمني. طب ما كان جه من الأول وأنا برئيس يعني.
On the other hand, many Egyptians denounced Suleiman's move as they contend that the former spy chief was a servant of deposed Mubarak, as they have also accused him of being a close ally of the U.S. and Israel.
أنا من وجهة نظري شايف إن بقى رئيس
Mubarak and all his officials took the orders from the U.S. and we all know that Omar Suleiman was standing in the way of the Palestinian reconciliation and was a servant to the U.S.
هم اللي هيحطوا لنا رئيس الجمهورية.
In essence, Egyptians are calling for the prosecution of Suleiman, who served as ousted Mubarak's vice president during the revolution, as they strongly believe that he played a key role in killing protesters and of aiding Israel to strengthen its grip on the occupied territory. The first post-Mubarak presidential election will be held on the 23rd and 24th of May, and if no single candidate wins, the two leading contenders will face each other in the runoffs, which are slated for the 16th and 17th of June. Many here deem Omar Suleiman's move as a coup against the revolution, and they have vowed to prevent a return of any ex-Mubarak officials to power in order to protect the success of the revolution and all its objectives. Karim Gamaluddin, Press TV, Cairo.
Mr. Riyad Bassoun is a professor and a strategic expert, joining us now live from Beirut to share his thoughts with us on the situation in Egypt. Professor Bassoun, thanks for being with us. Omar Suleiman has said that if I was intelligence chief and then vice president for a few days, that doesn't mean I was part of a regime against which the people mounted a revolt. Now, in your opinion, was he not an important part of the former regime in Egypt that had close ties with the US and Israel? He is said to be the man behind the export, for instance, of Egypt's gas to Israel.
He was definitely a very important pillar of the former regime. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that he has conducted criminal activities against the people. So I think that half of his statement is true, but the other half is not true.
Well, Mr. Bassoun, the thing is, as a member of the former regime, why is Suleiman now in a position to be able to run for the presidency rather than have that case investigated, rather than be put on trial and legally for the law to determine whether he is responsible for the deaths of people or not?
Yes, I think that he was called for witness in the trial of President Mubarak. And I haven't seen that the general prosecutor has highlighted the possibility that he been transferred from being a witness to being a suspect. Now, if he is suspected of having committed illegal activities, he must be trialed as anyone else. Now, as long as he is not suspected, he has the right as anyone else to submit a candidacy and to run for presidency. Now, is it a good thing that he runs for presidency? I don't think that he made a good move and a good decision, because although there still are in the within the Egyptian society probably a certain percentage of the population that have a kind of nostalgia of the former regime, I don't think anyway that he has any chance to prevail, and besides prevailing, he has even no chance to receive, let's say, some reward or content for this candidacy. And I really don't understand from a strategic point of view, why is it that he has decided to run for presidency. The situation, for example, of Amr Moussa is a little bit different, because Amr Moussa has the ambition to rally the voices of those who are not with the Muslim Brothers. But Omar Suleiman knows that he has no single chance to do so, and besides he has the Muslim Brotherhood against him. So why is he, right after the revolution, why is he running now for presidency? For me, it is a weird decision from a strategic point of view.
And that is the major question, isn't it, why he's made this move? The Muslim Brotherhood has said, Professor Bassoon, that Omar Suleiman's bid for the presidency is an attempt to, quote, steal the revolution and is an insult to the nation. How do you analyze his return to the Egyptian political scene? Do you agree with the people who are saying he was pushed to come forward by the US and Israel, which were close allies to the regime that he was part of?
No, I believe I have a different analysis. The way I see it is that the Muslim Brotherhood had made a promise during the uprising and after the stepping down of Hosni Mubarak. They made the promise that they will not, even if they win the chamber, they will not propose a candidacy for presidency, so that they will not monopolize all the powers. Now, when they made the decision to change that stand and to run for presidency and to claim their ambition to control the presidency, after that they control the chamber, there I think that on the international level, some forces decided that it may be relevant to counter the Muslim Brotherhood by any mean, and Omar Suleiman's candidacy is one of those means. However, once again, I think that it is a weak mean. He will not be able to achieve anything in this election, because this election, as long as the Muslim Brotherhood candidate and his candidacy is validated, I think he will win the contest.
So basically, Mr. Bassoon, if you could also quickly tell us, when you say that this maybe is an attempt against the Muslim Brotherhood by Mr. Suleiman, who are, do you think, the forces or the people or groups that did force him to come forward? Do you have any idea about that?
I think that the United States first, and let's say the Western countries, the NATO countries, are not comfortable with the new stand, the new political approach adopted by the Muslim Brotherhood, which they see is more radical than what they were expecting after the parliamentary elections. After the parliamentary election, they thought that the Muslim Brotherhood will be happy with the result and will start to try governing the country, ruling the country, and sharing the executive with some other parties. Now that they have the ambition to gain also the presidency, I think that this created kind of discomfort in the United States, in Washington, but also in many European countries, and probably this is the source of which triggered the candidacy of Omar Suleiman.
So basically, another question just comes to my mind now, Mr. Bassoon, and that is when we are speaking about the Muslim Brotherhood and you say the fact that Western countries and the US do not view it very pleasantly, they think it's a radical group. But is there a difference now? Do you make a distinction between the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, which is getting the support of the US right now?
Yes, we can make a difference today because they are not at the same stage of their evolution, let's say. But what the Muslim Brotherhood have done in Egypt can have us fearing a little bit what the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria may do in the future, because in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood committed to pay kind of respect to the diversity of the political forces that regrouped in order to oust the regime of Hosni Mubarak. But we have seen that 6 months later, even somebody like Amr Moussa, but also the secular groups, but also the traditional political parties, they are now complaining about this radicalization of the Muslim Brotherhood. And I see no reason why in Syria, if the same scenario is going to occur, and in spite of certain promises that are engaged with this regard, I don't see why at the end of the day they will not change, because in politics, when you have the force, when you have the power, the natural thing is to try to impose it.
Thank you very much, Professor Riyad Bassoon, strategic expert, joining us there live from Beirut with his thoughts. Thank you, Professor Bassoon. Well, let's move on with the news. Also in the headlines today, Iran says the first round of talks with the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany, known as the P5+1, will be held in Turkey, and the second round in Iraq. The Supreme National Security Council says the venue of the talks was agreed on in negotiations between Iranian and EU officials. The Council said the first round of talks is set to be held in Istanbul on April 14th. It added that the date of the second round of the talks in Baghdad will be announced after the Istanbul meeting. Meanwhile, Iran's Foreign Minister Ali Akbar Salehi said Tehran hopes that the P5+1 will come to the negotiating table with honesty. He said Tehran would also make an effort so that both sides reach a win-win conclusion. Salehi added that Tehran will not accept any preconditions before the talks. Now, rights activists continue to highlight the case of Abdul Hadi al-Khawaja, whose hunger strike in a Bahraini jail has lasted over 2 months. His lawyer says the Khawaja could be dead. The protesters have gathered outside the United Nations headquarters in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, calling on the international community to support the revolution in Bahrain.
We're here today in solidarity with the case of both Abdul Hadi al-Khawaja and all political prisoners who are unjustly imprisoned in Bahrain. Abdul Hadi is entering his over 60th day of hunger strike, and the silence and complicity of international institutions such as the United Nations and also our governments in the West, coupled with the silence and complicity of many in the Arab world, is a source of shame. It's time really that we translated our emotional solidarity with the case of Abdul Hadi into practical solidarity. It's time for people to wake up.
Today you are here to send a message to the United Nations, to Mr. Ban Ki-moon, to the ICC court, to know that there is one person, he is Abdul Hadi Khawaja. His human rights, calling for freedom, calling for democracy. He is just a peaceful person asking for democracy, and the government of Bahrain are dealing those people in a very bad way.
No let-up in anti-regime protests in Bahrain. The tiny Persian Gulf kingdom has been going through a revolution since February 2011. The peaceful demonstrators want an end to the rule of the Al Khalifa regime, which has lasted for several decades. Since last year, scores of protesters have been killed, some even tortured to death by regime forces with the help of troops from Saudi Arabia. The United States and its regional allies have fallen short of condemning the Bahraini regime's tough crackdown against the protesters. Many link Washington's silence to the fact that Bahrain hosts the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. In the latest act of violence, regime forces attacked crowds of protesters demanding the release of prominent human rights activist Abdulhadi Al-Khawaja, who is serving a life sentence since last year for his role in anti-regime protests. The rights activist has been on hunger strike for more than 2 months in protest at his detention, which he considers illegal. Khawaja also holds Danish nationality, but the Bahraini authorities have rejected a request for his transfer to Denmark.
This regime is living in the dark ages, in the Middle Ages, and they don't understand the language of dialogue or the language of peace or the language of human rights or the language of freedom. And I guess the Denmark and the European Union have the responsibility to release Khawaja by threatening this authority, which would not understand except by force and by violent language.
Khawaja's health is now deteriorating and he is said to be on the verge of death. The regime has so far defied all national and international calls to set Khawaja free. It keeps many other activists behind bars on charges of organizing and attending protests.
You're watching Press TV's World News. Time for another look now at the headlines. Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood says the presidency bid by the former regime's spy chief is an attempt to steal the revolution. Iran says a deal has been reached to hold the first round of talks with the P5+1 group in Istanbul and the second round in Baghdad. And in Bahrain, anti-regime protesters block roads and set tyres on fire, demanding the release of a jailed activist on hunger strike. To stay with us, still to come, the US and Afghanistan sign a deal on night raids. We'll be back. Welcome back. In Syria, an anti-government armed group says it's ready to respect a peace plan brokered by the UN Arab League joint envoy, Kofi Annan.
The Joint Command of the Free Syria Army inside Syria announces its complete commitment to Kofi Annan, in line with the UN Security Council resolution, which calls for a ceasefire from all parties. And we announce a ceasefire against the army beginning on the morning of April the 10th. We will honor this promise if the government remains committed to the initiative.
The group says it will present its guarantees and commitments to the international community and not to the Syrian government. Earlier, the government demanded that armed groups provide written guarantees to stop their attacks. It also demanded Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Turkey stop funding the groups. Damascus says terrorist attacks have increased since an understanding was reached on Annan's peace plan. The initiative is aimed at ending a deadly year-long unrest which Damascus blames on foreign-backed armed gangs. Violence still rages on, with fresh conflicts reported in Homs. 3 more towns were also the scene of anti-government protests. Well, Syrians will go to the polls in parliamentary elections in less than a month. The vote is part of President Bashar al-Assad's constitutional reforms aimed at ending the year-long deadly unrest in the country. Press TV's Muhammad Ali has more on the electoral campaign.
Parliamentary elections in Syria are nearing as ballot boxes will open on the 7th of May to define the 250 new parliamentarians. The elections are the first to be carried out according to the new constitution, which Syrians agreed on in February in a public referendum. The new constitution allows a multi-party system and gives the right to licensed political parties to share power and rule the state. Every party is now able to present its program via its parliamentary candidate.
تكون انتخابات شفافة ونزيهة.
We hope the elections would be honest. If I won, I will work on fighting corruption, improving the economy and creating job opportunities to decrease unemployment.
The candidates have started preparing for their media campaign, which according to head of the Higher Committee for Elections, it should not be on a sectarian, tribal or factional basis. 9 political parties have been established so far since President Assad issued a law in August last year allowing the establishment of political parties. Some of them are opposition parties. Those agree that they should take part in a reform process in their country.
We decided to create an opposition party inside Syria. We do not acknowledge opposition groups outside Syria. Our party is running for the elections to participate in the political and social life in the country and work for the benefit of the Syrians and the homeland.
The Syrian Arab News Agency quoted Assistant Interior Minister as saying that 14,788,644 Syrian citizens are over the age of 18 and eligible to vote. The number of parliamentary candidates reached 7,195, among them 710 women. In less than a month, Syrians will vote for their representatives at the parliament. The upcoming elections will be carried out based on the new elections law that was set last year as part of President al-Assad's reform program. Hamad Ali, Press TV, Damascus.
During the more than a decade-long US-led war in Afghanistan, homes where Afghans used to enjoy privacy have commonly been targeted by foreign forces during night raids. Kabul has now reached a deal with the US which allows Afghan troops to be the leading force in nighttime door-to-door searches. Washington has hailed the agreement, saying it further paves the way for the inking of a strategic partnership pact with Kabul. Here's more.
Claps and applauses. The agreement that removed one of the major obstacles to the sealing of the U.S.-Afghan strategic partnership was welcomed by Kabul.
Handing over the control of night operations to Afghan forces is a turning point in restoring our sovereignty and shows a boost in capabilities of our security forces. This is an honor for Afghan people and government. From now on, only Afghan forces can search the homes and private properties as part of night operations.
Under the deal signed by Wardak and commander of the U.S.-led forces in Afghanistan, General John Allen, a newly formed Afghan Special Operations Unit will take the lead in searches of houses and private compounds and arrest suspected militants.
The people of Afghanistan can be very proud to know that their Special Operations Forces have taken lead for the conduct of counter-terrorist operations in Afghanistan.
According to the agreement, U.S. forces will also provide support, but only, quote, as required or requested. The special operations, including the night raids, will still be based on U.S. intelligence. And Afghan forces will continue to depend on American airstrikes during the raids. The majority of these operations are nighttime raids in which U.S. and Afghan troops descend without warning on homes or residential compounds searching for militants. The raids are widely resented by Afghans, and President Hamid Karzai has repeatedly called for a halt to all night raids by U.S.-led foreign forces. Many Afghans believe the raids, which have caused many civilian deaths, violate their privacy and disrespect women. They say regardless of the new deal, such raids must be halted altogether.
We don't want any forces entering our houses during the night, neither American forces and nor Afghan forces. If they really need to inspect homes, they must come first and get permission and then enter the houses.
The deal comes ahead of next month's NATO summit in Chicago, where Washington expects to strike a strategic partnership pact with Kabul. The partnership will also keep the U.S. military forces in Afghanistan after 2014, when all foreign combat troops are set to leave the country. Now, the timing has raised questions among experts who suspect that the deal will not lead to any significant results.
I think U.S. forces will continue their operations in the future. This deal will just be a type of media propaganda to reduce some of the weight on President Karzai in front of the Afghans.
Mr. Ahmad Shah Ahmadzai is a former Afghan Prime Minister joining us now live from Kabul to share his thoughts with us. Mr. Ahmadzai, President Hamid Karzai was always complaining about the night raids by the US Army, raiding the homes of Afghan civilians in the middle of the night with little to no legal oversight. But the deal will legalize these raids, will it not?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Night raid by its meaning, it is completely insult to the human being. Especially night raids, that means harassment to the innocent people of that house, including children, women. And if it is run by Afghans or by NATO, it is a hated action. But again, now the agreement, we heard it, it is not beneficial for the Afghans. Night raids is completely an harassment and terroristical action. And how come they are here in Afghanistan saying we are fighting the terrorism, and they are acting and they are doing terrorist action? And especially night raids are completely against the privacy of those who are living in the house, and they are bothering and torturing the innocent people like children and women and elder people in that house. And it is very easy for them to carry this in the daytime, in the light of the sun. They can ask the accused person to come to the police or to the judgment to ask, and whatever investigation they want, they can do it. Because now they are saying to the world that we have everything under control. When things are under control, as they say, the NATO forces, why they don't do it in the daytime instead of the night?
Right. And Mr. Ahmadzai, some critics of the deal say that this deal will provide the US with more cover than they have had in the past when such night raids go wrong, because an Afghan judge would decide the US troops to conduct such raids. What's your view on that?
No, as I said, the conducting the night raids, none of the Afghan will agree to that. And Mr. Karzai, he was speaking about the this night raid be abandoned, but they didn't listen. They have just changed the shape of the night raids, and we know when the announcement says that the Afghan forces, they go to the houses in the night raid and will be supported and will be backed by the American or by the NATO forces. This means again that they will have a big hand in these operations, not the Afghans.
Okay, thank you very much. Ahmad Shah Ahmadzai, former Afghan Prime Minister, joining us there live from Kabul with his comments. Well, thank you very much for staying with us. I'm afraid we've run out of time for this edition of the news. Do stay with us in a couple of minutes. I'll be back with news in brief.